Bosco, I want first of all to understand from where you sit when it comes to the aspect of regional integration, the state of East African community. I would like to understand from where you sit what is actually currently going on. You head the Business Council of the East African Community. A lot is happening from that particular space. We've seen what we've seen. Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda took Kenya to court, the East African Court of Justice. What is happening from where you sit?
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for having me. And I want to, first of all, appreciate you and appreciate my fellow panel.
Yeah.
In terms of thinking about the integration. Integration, let me take back first that the integration covered by the treaty.
Jean Bosco, we will want to fix your sound. There's a bit of muffleness on it, but we're going to fix that. But let me come back right here in studio. But stay with us. Our teams right there will definitely be working on that particular sound with you just now. But let me start with you also here in studio, Kennedy. You are an expert when it comes to legal matters on integration matters. You spent some time looking at the treaties within the integration space. From what we've seen, it's been an on and off, affair with the member states of East African Community. Today, there are problems within the region: Burundi, Rwanda, DRC, Rwanda, Uganda, Kenya. What is really going on in terms of the aspect of honoring the Treaty of Regional Integration? Is there a binding, force that could be able to decide who should be put accountable for what is happening, and who would that be?
Oh, thank you so much, Bwana Eugene. Indeed, I've spent part of my time researching on matters of regional integration.
Yes.
And basically looking at the EAC, first of all, we have to appreciate one fact, that if you look at the regional economic communities that we have today, we talk of EAC in a positive way when it comes to comparing it with other counterparts, and that's something we have to appreciate. But on the other hand, we also have to note with a lot of concern that we have a number of challenges that still face this region. And now, going to your question, whether the treaty is binding enough or not, indeed the treaty binds, because a treaty once signed, from the legal aspect, we say, once independent states or states that have their own nationality in that way or the other, they decide to come together to fade off that aspect of sovereignty so that they are able to achieve a common goal. So the moment you put it down, it binds you. And that is the reference in terms of law. We refer to
it binds on paper.
It binds.
So, because if we're to go by the treaty in terms of the aspect of allowing for free movement of people and goods and services, Burundi just closed off its border for one of its regional member states of the region. At this particular level, from a treaty perspective, that violation, what happens to it in terms of the agreement that every member of EAC agrees about?
Yes, thank you. Binding nature of a treaty is one thing. Enforcement of the elements of the treaty is where we have a problem. So basically, when we say the treaty binds, it's because you can actually seek recourse in any, let's say, judicial organ, for example, ESCJ, which I believe we are going to talk about. So the problem we are facing in the EAC at the moment is that why are these partner states are not living up to the dictates of the EAC treaty?
Correct.
The reason being is that the manner in which the provisions of these treaties is supposed to be enforced, that is where we have a weak link. So the question would be, why would we have outright violation of the treaty? Probably because the person violating the treaty already has made assessment, and they are throwing their hands, say, even if we do this,
nothing will happen.
Nothing will happen.
Yes.
And therefore, we need to actually dissect deeply that what are the levels of, let's say, redress if we find a violation of a treaty. We have different levels of redress. For example, the East African Court of Justice. Today, we want to say again, personally, I'm a pro-integration. And therefore, irrespective of the challenges that we see, I would still go down and appreciate some of the efforts that have been made. The ESCJ has actually made, the East Africa Court of Justice has made a lot of progress, looking at from 2001, when this court, began its operations to date. And you look at the very beginning, it was giving declaratory orders, whereby it was only pronouncing that, okay, this particular partner state has, gone against the ideals of the community. But if we trace that path up to the latest, some of the judgments that are made in 2019, and referring to, for example, 2018, that's the former speaker of the East African community, when she sued the secretariat, she was awarded almost over 111,000 US dollars. Look at the Martha Karua case. She was awarded around 25,000. But now, if we look at that progress, the question is, at the point when there's a violation, why are we not running to the court? Or seeing the court, doing more in that sense? Very well. Now, you mentioned in your introductory statement that Uganda actually has sued Kenya. That is a very positive move, because the moment a partner state finds it valid to sue another, then therefore we are feeling that the integration works. Right. We'll come to explain more a bit about that, because there are those who feel, why would you take me to court when we could actually talk this out as friends? Let me bring in Oluwatobi, who's joining us all the way from Israel. If we have her, we could be able to get in touch with her. Thank you very much for actually joining us all the way from Israel. And I want to just bring your thoughts, or I'd like you to bring your thoughts on this particular aspect of integration before we even start looking at the role of the international community, because we've had the aspect of the loopholes in enforcement of some of the treaties of integration. And probably that is where the challenge is, where probably people who have ill intentions find a loophole to get in there. Talk to me a bit about your thoughts on this. Is this a fallacy? When you talk about we want to integrate 54 African countries, we want to integrate. Is it even possible, or we are just chasing a wild goose chase?
Well, Eugene, thank you very much. I'm very privileged to be all the way from here. I think the way to push this would be, if you want to look at where to integrate as Africa, as a continent, I think perhaps we want to look at what are our common problems. And we find that in the Eastern region, we have quite a number of common problems. Right? We're talking about which has been run by social, mobility, rising living, rising inflation, even productivity. All the partners are expensive. Now, one of the ways that we should approach integration is, in my opinion, look at those that have succeeded and then replicate them into different aspects.
So we need to look at those who have succeeded and replicate from that particular aspect. And that is definitely what I want to ask. And I don't know if we already have Jean Bosco back. When we have him, please let me know. Just sticking to that point of looking at the success stories of those who have succeeded. Let me come back to studio. I'm going to come back to you, Olua. But just Kennedy, when it comes to the aspect of looking at the success stories, do we have enough role model nations or countries or regions that have successfully integrated that we are failing to learn from, especially from the aspect of what made them prosper? Yes,
we do have. Actually, when you go deeply to the genesis of regional integration, actually, within the international legal framework, we refer to the UN Charter, that is Chapter 8 of the UN Charter, that actually calls upon nations to, cooperate. But with them, they are actually aligning it to the matters of maintaining international peace and security.
Yeah.
And then when you look at, again, other regions like the European Union, actually we have 4 theories, or rather 4 motivation for integration. First of all is affection. So affection is where countries or nations who are sharing certain common borders, they're like, we cannot stand alone. And that is what we pursued as East Africa. And then we also have gain. So again, it means we come together, pool our resources.
Because we have an interest.
Because we have an interest.
Yeah.
And then we have threat. Now, the European Union actually, if you look at from the very beginning, 1951, where they signed a treaty to eliminate the struggles over coal and steel. And they were motivated by a threat that was imminent. And therefore, when they were integrating, they were, more of enjoying together because they did not want to be affected in one way or the other. And the other theory is the theory of power. And that one we see with NATO and even the European Union. Now, looking at the European Union, the way it has evolved, it has a lot of best practices that the EAC can borrow. For example, if you look at the manner in which they have the decision-making body, the supreme bodies, you find that the role of the European Commission, that is akin to what we have here as the EAC Secretariat, it has a lot of powers. It actually implements the decision of the court, the European Court of Justice, or Court of Justice of the European Union. That's how they reframed it. And then, when you come here, we were talking about enforcement of the ESCJ. Enforcement of the ESCJ, to the contrary, actually relies on the mechanisms of the partner states.
We'll come to talk a bit about that.
Exactly.
Yes.
So now, within the European Union, its best practice that also comes at the highest level, what they call it the European Council, while here we call it the summit. Now, look at a situation whereby you are saying what is the option of these 2 partner states coming together and maybe making those decisions. First of all, within the EAC, the summit cannot sit if all members have not attended. So the quorum is entirely all members. This is a challenge. So it means that anybody can veto it. It's the same thing we are seeing with challenges with the United Nations Security Council, whereby an individual member or an individual partner state would actually veto a decisions of the rest. So it means that even if you are creating some kind of turbulence, you still hold certain powers to frustrate the procedure through which we are able to solve this. So European Union has come out of that totally. And in terms of integration as well, you find that European Union applies what we call supranational integration model, whereby they faded off of their sovereignty. And we also have an aspect of what we call you are a citizen of the Europe or European Union. In East Africa, we don't have citizen of East Africa. We use it casually, but within the EAC treaty, they don't refer to it. They were very keen in 1999 when they were developing the treaty, to the extent that they said the citizens of the partner states of the East Africa. So these loopholes actually tells you that we are actually an intergovernmental other than supranational. So we still have our partner states at the very levels of government.
In isolation.
So it means that at any particular point when issues about the regional integration come on board, you find that someone has one partner state who basically, just fade it off, and you see nothing happens. So if we look at the European Union, the way they have integrated and the way they have developed, and another thing, the treaty alone, as you said, we cannot have one treaty that's going to serve entirely. Actually, if you look at the boilerplate, the last provisions of that treaty say the treaty will serve for perpetual whatever. In the European Union, it's not the same. They are actually developing treaties as they progress.
Right. So there's an aspect of progression, work in progress. I'm told John Bosco is back, and I just want to loop him in on this, especially on the aspect of the lessons that we can learn, and of course looking at the current situation. John Bosco, I want to pick your thoughts on this, especially on the current state of affairs. I was not able to hear you well when we started. I'd love to hear what you're saying in terms of the voice of the businesses within the region on the current state of affairs, the current diplomatic challenges that we are seeing within the region. What is the business community saying, and how best can that voice be amplified so that we can call our leaders to order, especially those that are actually seen openly violating the treaty of the integration process?
Thank you, Amanda. I hope you can hear me well.
Yes, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I broke up. I had said that the treaty is very clear. The treaty states that integration is integration, and market-driven integration. So those are very important, and they need to be. So there has been violation of treaty by partners because of the interests and because sometimes the case was that are enslaved the So I highlighted the issue and what are the key. One is that a community you need to free or adhere to the principle. You need to comply provisions and so what is happening? What's exciting is the private sector. Some of partner states say the principle of paying with the provisions.
Yeah, but
and that has an impact. Both has an impact on the citizens, because the integration is to promote parity. But what we are looking at is a high level of protection.
Yeah.
Partner state.
Yeah. I will want to come back to you, Jean Bosco, a bit later on, especially on the aspect of the strength of these organs, these institutions of the East African community. We were here on this particular platform on the summit, and we had of the idea that we have good integration ideas, but the systems that are supposed to check and balance this particular process are weak in terms of calling to order, calling out those who actually violate the spirit of integration. We'll come back to you to help us understand that. But let me bring in Olua, just to be able to understand also what we've heard from other speakers on this particular conversation. What is the missing link? You've written or you've also worked so much around African issues. What do you think is the missing link, just very briefly, in terms of the quest for Africa to consolidate itself, to integrate itself? What is the missing link?
Well, if I had that answer, I would be a billionaire by now, wouldn't I? I think it's not as simple as trying to make it. You know, Africa as a whole is very beautiful but environment, and you have to take a look at integration. What is the reason behind that? A continental integration, regional agreements, or integration. As for the missing link, well, get
yeah, we seem to be having some, cut on your voice. I think we can also fix that. But I'm really loving what you're bringing out in terms of first we need to ask ourselves, why are we integrating? And if we get to understand all that, then we can be able to build on the building blocks on that. I want you to hold that thought in that particular sense. We're coming back to you in just a bit. But let me come back to studio right here, Kennedy Abuya, especially on the aspect of the institutions that are supposed to do the checks and balances. We seem to be having a problem there, but I don't know if you agree on that. If we have the East African Community Secretariat, if we have the Court of Justice, if we have the Business Council, which Jean Bosco, a good friend joining us today, is part of. A lot of citizens within this particular region sometimes tend to feel that there's a very huge gap in there, especially on putting their voice out there on specific issues like the ones we're seeing today. Do you agree, or this is by design, that that's how it's going to be? It can't be better than this?
I do agree. First, maybe to echo what John Bosco has mentioned. As I was making the comparison with the EU, again, one aspect that I wanted to drop is that EU is actually people-centered. So you find that there's a lot of participation of the EU citizens, especially when it comes to appointment of the representative to the parliament, which is not the case here. Now, coming to the EAC, In fact, if you look at the treaty, looking at the fundamental principles that govern the achievements of the obligations, or rather the aspirations, people-centeredness is actually a principle that is recognized. So we from there, as we make analysis, we expect maybe certain instruments to be developed to allow people to feel that they are part and parcel of this.
Is that the case today?
However, that's not the case, and it has never been the case. The former EAC Secretary General, called Juma Mapachu, actually made a statement that if we don't redesign how we are implementing the EAC, we are going to, we end up creating a club of elites, where population is left behind, and we have our political figures, people who are able to discuss this at this very platform carrying the day. But coming to the institutions, we have a problem, and the problems we have are by design. Some of them are structural by design, but of course some of them are practical by virtue of not putting it into practice. So look at maybe in summary form, I've talked about the highest decision making. There's a problem there, even in terms of how they make decisions, because the decision has to be made by consensus. Remember, consensus does not allow voting. And if decision is supposed to be made by consensus, what do you expect? If someone just
don't feel it, they will
therefore there will be no decision as long as people come together to agree. This is not the case. It should have been maybe decision is made by unanimous or by qualified majority or by simple majority. That's one. When it comes to the Secretariat, I already mentioned, they don't have even powers to implement. They are under-resourced. They are struggling even to keep up, even to implement some of this, because we also have a very high level of default within the EAC.
Correct.
And therefore the sanction that have been provided cannot be happened because of those decisions. When it coming to court, court also has its own inherent problems, as much as it's trying to break, those kind of, shell that it has been enclosed in. And some of the problems we have in the court have said it does not have implementation mechanisms. When it makes a decision, these decisions is at the hand or at the mercy of that partner state. So if today I go to court, I say, let's say a partner state X has violated the treaty, they will make pronouncement, they may even provide for reparation, but I will have to go to that partner state X to actually implement that decision. That is a problem, because it could be, let go, and therefore there is nothing else that will happen.
So when they say that East African Community is the fastest growing, very well implemented regional bloc, in terms of looking at the, REX, when that particular comparison analysis is being made, then what are they usually looking at if this is the reality on the ground? Because from what you say, it seems like we are staring at a fallacy when you talk about EAC regional integration. Okay, the analysts, actually, most of them who say this are economists. So basically, I've told you what drives EAC. We are driven by gain, and we are not driven by a threat. For example, the rate at which we are growing, you can see if we say, okay, which regional bloc grows faster than ever. I think EAC. I think in the last 2 years, last year and this year, you have seen we have onboarded DRC, we have onboarded Somalia. So in terms of numbers, in terms of figures, we're actually doing well. But now those numbers, we are looking at, okay, we have a huge market right now, over 300 million, big market. But you see, this market is ineffective if we don't put in place, various mechanisms to ensure that the EAC ideals go deeply. And then these partner states who are actually joining are able to change whatever they need to change and then play by the rules of the region. So that is where the problem is. As much as we say, okay, we are growing, we are doing well, a lot of things happen, but those problems are coming. Another problem we have also, or rather another thing we can say in terms of doing well, in 2013, we had this scenario, the coalition of the willing, whereby Kenya, Rwanda, and Uganda came together, abolition of any other travel document apart from the ID. We had this one tourism visa. We have one network area. Now, these are some of the check boxes that probably you can take to the media and say, hey, we are doing well. However, there are those still very nitty-gritties that still, spike, and they are really spiking so deeply. But then also we're looking at the consistency of some of these initiatives. Especially talk to us a bit about, because once we have our other participants on the show, please, my very able team, let us know if we have the other two participants joining us virtually. I wanted to ask you, especially on the aspect of consistency, because these things, when you talk about the integration, how do we ensure consistency when everything seems to be lying on the goodwill or the bad will of the elected leader or the current government at that time. Because one leader comes in very, very pro-integration. After 5 years or 10 years, depending on the number of years for the term, another one comes in who doesn't really care about that and thinks only about their own country. How's that a threat for this integration process?
Yes, first of all, you know, integration, regional integration itself is a political move. It's more of, it requires a lot of political backing.
Yeah.
But political backing alone is not sufficient because, as you say, you know, it evolves. The regimes do evolve.
Yeah.
And one person has his or her own philosophy of governance and probably pro or against, you know, such kind of arrangements. I think the most important thing is to empower our institutions, to make sure that we look into these, you know, instruments or the legal instruments that actually establish, you know, some of these institutions and ask ourselves the big questions. Where do we have the gaps? And when we have the gaps, are we willing to address this gap? So who are the people to push for this? The private sector, because at the end of the day, private sector is a big contributor, especially when it comes to regional development. As much as we have, you know, the public sector, the political, you know, part of it, you know, as the formation from the political aspect. But again, at the very end, for us to realize the gains of every, you know, regional arrangement, basically the private sector has to come out very clearly. They must strongly, and they must play a very, you know, loud, you know, role in terms of ensuring that, you know, if it is free movement of persons. The other day I was trying to dissect the recent act. They passed what we call the East African Act on Elimination of Non-Tariff Barriers. And if you look at the implementation structure, is actually it's at the level of the partner states, and the partner states are supposed to create what we call the country or national monitoring committees, whereby if you, let's say, order your products are going to partner state A, and you see delays that are not justified by law, then you are supposed to seek for that committee. But I'm telling you, if you look at the ES region, I don't know the number of partner states who have established that. So it means that if you are offended, even on the line of, you know, non-tariff barriers, you know, procedural, whatever, you know, hold or whatever, some such charges which are not justified by law, literally you have nowhere for recourse. And this affects private sector so much.
Right. Do we have Jean Bosco back? Do we have Love back? If we do have them, I would love to bring them back to this particular conversation. It would be very interesting to be able to also get their thoughts on this. Jean Bosco, if you're there with us, I wanted to just read your thoughts on this, especially on your role as private sector, because at the end of the day, you know, the regional integration process is too big to be left to the politicians. And there's this particular feeling that, you know, private sector, other institutions of EAC have been too weak to be able to, you know, do anything or call out any of the leaders within the region who's violating any of the agreed on principles of integration. What is going on with you? Why is this the case? Are you toothless? Is there a way that you can be able to push for, you know, the agendas of the private sector in order to steer the integration process away from the hands of the politicians who have no interest in seeing us integrate as a region?
Yeah, indeed, you are very right. Eugene and my father was elaborated in the institutional issue. But I always describe integration with 3 I's.
Yeah.
One is the institution. The second I is incentive.
Yeah.
The third I is interest. So you find that all the stakeholders must align their interests together. They must see the incentive, and we must build capable institutions.
Yeah.
And I think my brother highlighted that some of the institutions are very weak because the treaty is very clear. We are supposed to establish a trade remedies committee to block this conflict. But the trade remedies committee has never been established, given that provided for under customs union, under common market. So our dispute resolution mechanism are very weak. So that becomes a challenge to the private sector, it becomes a challenge to the civil society, it even becomes a challenge to the policymakers themselves, because there is no structured institution that is able to resolve the conflict when they are alive.
So are you saying your hands are tied, John Bosco? Are you saying there's nothing you can do as a business council to call out any of the regional leaders who actually probably come up with decisions that affect the process of integration?
No, at the ABC, we've been doing a very proactive role in terms of advocacy, in terms of engaging the policymakers, in terms of engaging the leaders, in terms of demonstrating the losses that emanate from this protectionism tendency. So we've been very vocal, we've been engaging, and we are even doing it now. Wherever we have an opportunity to the head of state, our voice is very strong. But we need to have a very unified approach. We need to not only the private sector, but we need also to work with a strong platform.
Let me ask you.
What I've realized that these platforms are very, very, very weak. They are very, very weak from national level, from the regional level, because of the challenges related to funding. The funding is not only to the government, but also the private sector. Sometimes because of their interests, some of these issues are also caused by the private sector.
Let me ask you a quick one, especially on the aspect. Jean Bosco, sorry. Let me ask you, especially on the aspect of the powers, the abilities of the council, for example, in the case of the closure of the border between Rwanda and Burundi, for instance, in that particular case, what have you come up with as a council on behalf of the business community within the region that are actually affected by this particular situation? Or is this something that is beyond your hands?
Within our process, and I've been very, very vocal myself. I raised this issue to different media platforms. Even now, in Kampala, I've raised this with various international media platforms, and I've called the head of state to resolve this issue immediately. But we are not only doing that, we are also indicating the losses that are emanating not only to Rwanda, to the entire community. Not Rwanda the loss alone, it's the citizens of the US who are losing. This is to see a number of trucks that are stuck at the border of Burundi, from Kenya, from Tanzania, from Pakistan. It's a loss to the community. It's not a loss to Rwanda as a country. So we've been very vocal and lucky. A lot of evidence we are looking at terms of numbers, the losses. But the good thing we are working closely with the working with the general to put forward their position paper to ensure that this border is open.
Right.
Yesterday we met the government of Kenya, government of the leaders of banning cage to Salam, because that are the citizens, not Kenya and Tanzania. So we are very focused.
Yeah.
Through evidence.
I've gotten you. Thank you so much, John Bosco, for that. Very interesting. Of course, we are keeping tabs on this, but particularly on how this unfolds. We understand that the Secretary General, the chair of the East African Community has this on their table, just trying to see how to actually go about it in terms of intervention in that particular case. I don't know if we have Olua. If we do have you, I'd love to read your thoughts on this, just very briefly, on the role of the international community, because sometimes we've heard from several forums that a lot of the things that we see most of the times, there are those outside forces that actually have a hand in this, especially looking at the threat that a united Africa would have for some of the other interests that they have when they want to see probably a fragmented continent. Just real quick, in your opinion, do you see this as a valid argument, or do you feel, nah, there is no such thing, there's just a big problem on some of the structures of integration? All right. I think we seem to have lost her, but when we get her, we'll be able to get her thoughts on that. I'll bring that question to you, Abuya, and especially on the aspect of the international community, or those who are external forces, for lack of a better word.
Yes, you cannot take away the international community in all these arrangements. First of all, I did mention that if you look at some of the challenges, resources.
Yeah.
John Bosco has talked about interests.
Yeah.
And some of the things that even make us see these squabbles amongst the states or the partner states, even at the level of East Africa, the level of Africa, because again, we have the 1991 Abuja Treaty, whereby we are forward-looking to have an African economic community, not only East Africa. This is just but a pathway towards an integrated Africa. Yeah. But you see, even that one, the dream is so far, because the resources that we require are not adequate, and therefore we still have to rely on other external forces. And this is where the international community come in. Remember, historically, and from the international relations experts, they talk about the world systems, where we have the peripheries, the semi-peripheries, and the core. Yeah. So we, the global south, we are definitely maybe in the peripheries, thereabout. And with that, it means we still have to, get help from elsewhere. For example, the AU headquarters, we did not have resources to put it up. We had to rely on the, some other hands to put it up entirely with everything. Yeah. And when as a gift. As a gift. And if you receive a gift, and that's why in law, in some of the clauses, when we draft, we say in such a scenario, you are not supposed to receive a gift, because your independence will be affected in one way or the other. So that is then international community also comes in terms of conflict management and conflict resolution. I referred to the UN Charter, actually says that once these regional communities, I'm talking about even at the level of Africa, once we have those plans and arrangements, then we need to try and solve our problems within that. Yeah. And because if you look at the EAC, for example, our sanction mechanisms are very weak. And therefore, we still depend on the international community actually to impose their sanction, actually to bring certain members to order. It has happened in the EAC, it has happened at the level of Africa, especially in the West Africa, whereby ECOWAS, because ECOWAS has really done very well in terms of conflict resolution. We, East Africa, we have EAC protocol on peace and security of 2013, but it's not working so well. And that's why you see we have still challenges, yet we are not able to pronounce ourselves so well as a region. But when it comes to ECOWAS, we have recorded scenarios whereby they have actually stepped in, they have sanctioned their members, they have done so. But again, in the absence of so, you have seen recently, even the international community, the European Union, the Americas, the wherever, they are able to put certain sanctions that will call to order certain, maybe one or two, partner states or member states who are not playing by the rules. So the international community comes in on such a scenario. Right.
And talking about that, I think what is it that we would be able to tell people who had a lot of hopes? Because when I talked about the fluctuation in the zeal and the efforts and the initiatives of the integration process, we've seen it in our lifetime, where we see there's this EAC Secretary General who's very strong, very passionate. There's the chair of the Heads of State Summit who's very pro-integration, and we see a lot of hope, only for that again to flip and go down to another level. And people who have lived their lives up to date with the wish of seeing a united front of the continent, of the region, and are losing that particular hope, that zeal. Where is the common currency? Are we even going to have a political federation? We're talking now of the SCFTA. If we can't manage this, 5-6 countries together, will we manage all of us? What would you tell such people from a legal perspective in terms of what they should expect to manage the expectations?
Yes, as I mentioned again from the very beginning, I'm a pro-integration. Yes. And therefore, at all points, despite all these kind of challenges, I would still go back and say there's a lot of hope. Yeah. There's a lot of hope. As much as we are saying we have challenges, we also need to record some of the gains we have gotten, like one-stop border post, infrastructure improvements. We are seeing, I've just mentioned what we had from the coalition of the willing, and now the borders are still extending, even though they have not been put to achieve the expected outcomes or the desired gains, but still there's hope. And why do I say there's hope? There's hope because we have something to refer to. I want to give a situation of border closure, whereby Jean Bosco, the private sector, they have mentioned that they are working on it. Now, we had a similar scenario, Uganda and Rwanda, and that case was a very good one because it would have tested the reaction of the court, the East African Court of Justice. However, last year it was thrown out on technicalities. So I think there's also a lot of sensitivity, sensitization
going on
that needs to be put out there. For example, look at the technicality that the case was filed beyond the 2 months provided by the by the rules that govern the filing references to the court. But if this case would have gone through, it would have created a very good what we call jurisprudence or case law, because this is another scenario of the similar nature. So we were only going to apply the outcome of the court. And in that scenario, for example, the Burundi case, if, for example, now the private sector, now the business community, they are able to look at and find when did Burundi make this statement, for example, and once they find it, they know that they have, as much as they are doing advocacy, as much as they are applying those other, other ways or mechanisms they have at their disposal. But I would wish that they don't allow the 2 months to elapse so that they can refer this particular case to the ESCJ. And I believe in that court that the ESCJ, you are not going to come empty-handed, whichever the outcome, even if a partner state is not going to implement, but at least if maybe after that regime or after that political whatever, we will find someone who will come back and start implementing. So that is why I'm saying there's a lot of hope. The institutions are weak, but at least they can offer something to rely upon. We don't have nothing.
That thing is missing. Oluwa, I'm told you're back with us. Thank you for staying with us. I wanted to take or read your thoughts, especially on the aspect of independence of the region and the continent at large. You've done so much work within the African continent, studied and all that. And of course, there are those who argue that the unity of the continent is a threat to some international forces, and therefore some of the challenges we see in terms of the peace between the member states are sometimes choreographed by external arms and external forces. How true is this? And of course, how can the region wean itself off such kind of influence and steer clear on the path of integration?
Well, thank you again for having me. I'd like to start referring to that, and referring to what Ms. Kennedy said earlier about the Eastern African bloc being driven by gain. When we're driven by stuff, then our results eventually. If the external forces which apprehend sort of integration, perhaps, but we should be focusing on where we want to get to. There's an African proverb that if you want to go fast, go, and if you want to go far, and while that may sound abstract, there's a lot of wisdom in that saying. In the sense that we have to get many partners involved. And if I just want to say regarding the international community. So while we're speaking of the international community, we have the ability to speak of some institutions. But I would like to challenge, why don't we look at the diaspora, which has been within the international community? Just like we have education from the private sector, within the Eastern African region, we should also have an expectation within the diaspora in the international community.
Yeah. So what I'm reading from you, even despite that challenge of hearing what you're saying, is the diaspora has a role and has to be roped in within the whole integration process, where they can also have a voice in terms of the whole process and ownership in that particular sense. I think that is very, very powerful in that sense. We seem to still have a challenge with the sound, but I want to appreciate you so much, Toby, for even sparing this moment to be able to talk to us on this particular sense. I'll try one more time when we come back for the round of closing closing remarks, but I want to hear from you, Kennedy. You say all is not lost, but what should we expect in the coming weeks, especially within the legal front and your own perspective on the diplomatic tips that we're seeing? How do you see the Rwanda-Burundi situation ending? How do you see, Kenya and Uganda ending up? Tanzania, they've said within 3 days they'll be able to fix the row between the flights and all that. What do you see in the next few days in terms of these trends?
Yes, as much as I say we have hope, I cannot forget also to reflect on the past events of the previous East African Cooperation, which actually died prematurely in 1977. Yeah. And one of the reasons why it died was political differences. And I don't think we are supposed to get there. And that's why the question is quite good, because we really need to anticipate. And as we say, we have different stakeholders. The integration agenda is not only left for the politician.
It should never be.
It cannot be, because integration agenda has different stakeholders. The media has to play its role, bring these things out there so that the civil society organizations are able to move with speed and condemn certain acts. Because again, government is by the people, for the people, and something of the sort. So if you find that we have a lot of call-outs from different quarters, I believe in one way or the other we'll find them giving audience to
and
some
do you think that's where the problem is? Because we have not had even civil society from the region coming out to call out a leader of the region who outrightly threatens to invade a member state of the region. I mean, is that where you see the problem, that we have not owned this process, we've left it to the politicians and to our leaders?
Eugene, you are absolutely right. And I want to refer you to a press release given on 12th by the Secretary General.
Yes.
I think it's on X, formerly Twitter.
Yes.
And here is trying to talk about all this. And the language he uses is so much careful to the extent that he doesn't want to mention any partner state, neither does he want to mention anybody. He may be right not to mention an individual, but there is that space to mention if a partner state is not playing by the rule. Let's call out and say, hey, this partner state is not doing ABCD. Then another development, was it yesterday or the other day, the current chair, that's the president of South Sudan, says they're going to create an envoy within the EAC actually to now work on the inter-partner state relations. Why do we need all this? Eugene, I tell you, we have the EAC treaty. The issue about the flight traffic rights, they're embedded within the EAC aviation cooperation. The issues about Uganda and Kenya, about the fuel and pipeline, they are all embedded within the EAC treaty. The issue we are seeing all these ones, let's say we also have the East African Peace and Security Treaty. We have East African Conflict Management Act. And in the Conflict Management Act, actually, it says that the partner states must appoint a panel of eminent persons. They only used it when you saw the former president of Kenya, Uhuru Kenyatta, coming to settle some matters in Congo. That's where they applied the act. But what about the treaty itself? It provides mechanism through which...
So we have what can guide us, we need to just use it.
We need to use it.
Right.
And therefore, maybe to sum up that one, is that our desire for the EAC to move forward requires participation of different actors. But I think media will play a greater role to sensitize masses, and then so that we can speak out, all of us.
All of us together. All right. Closing remarks. I want to come back to you, Olua, if this is good for you, just in under a minute. Are we really pushing things too fast? Are we not patient? Because even if we look at the larger countries that have integrated, it took time. Are we really being unfair to the region when we are pushing out for a speedy integration process, just in under a minute?
I don't think so. I think that's exactly the spirit of Africa that we have been waiting to see for many years. My closing remarks are, in any group setting, you should expect some level of friction, and you should expect external influence and integration into that. But the only way that we can move forward is if we can find common ground.
Yeah.
I do want to emphasize that we should acknowledge all the progress that we have made as a continent and progress in the region, but we should also strive to hold partners accountable. And remember, for every one of our decisions, as communities, as governments, as nations, millions of lives are affected. And I think Africa is really an interesting space to which I can tell you, based on the work that I'm doing, is gaining a lot of interest from a lot of international partners. And I would encourage, again, going back to diaspora, the diaspora to realize that Africa is the place to be. And for everyone living on the continent to know that you're in the place to be. And thank you so much for having me. I know it was a little bit challenging with the call and conversation. I've been very honored to be here and share my thoughts.
Thank you very much, Olua. That was amazing. And thank you for the commitment, dedication. It even had to get to that point. Thank you very much for the call in that sense. And I will keep in touch with you. I wanted to see if we have Jean Bosco just to also take his closing remarks. What should we expect going forward in the next few weeks? The issue of Rwanda, Burundi, Uganda, Kenya. What should we expect moving forward? Just real quick.
Yeah, I think that there is a commitment from our policymakers, our leaders, to resolve these issues amicably. But I think there are efforts being done, not only among the two countries, but across the region, in terms of resolving the issues. Because the implication is very huge in terms of losses, and that doesn't provide a positive aspect to our citizens. And as I mentioned, the EAC is the fastest growing region. There is excitement among our citizens. So we should not fight back. We should not fight back. Let's try to resolve the issues and
Yeah. Thank you for that particular remark. Of course, I want to say thank you to all of you for making time and for sparing your minutes and of course, to give us your thoughts on these particular issues that we are talking about right here on this particular program. It is the summit, and it's usually the shortest 1 hour, like we always say, but we try to maximize on that particular moment to try and just make sense of some of the things that are happening or developing within our continent and also within the spaces that we live in. I want to say thank you to our guests who joined us. I have Kennedy Abuya, a lawyer and consultant who joined us right here in studio. Thank you so much, Kennedy. Olua Tobilove, founder and CEO, Share Love International, all the way joining us from Israel, and she's been very instrumental on matters Africa and integration. We also had John Bosco Kalisa, the Chief Executive Officer of the East African Business Council. Thank you very much, all of you, for making time and being a part of the summit. We'll continue this conversation across our digital platforms. Developments are happening about these particular stories, and so we'll keep tabs on them, and hopefully we'll keep talking with the hope that we'll be able to find solutions and lasting solutions to our unity as a continent. This is our continent. It belongs to us. It's our region. We have a say, and we'll see you again next time, same place. As always, my name is Eugene Anangwe. Good luck.